Listen to me carefully now, because this is where most people get it wrong, and this misunderstanding keeps them trapped for years. You think the confusion you feel around a narcissist means something is wrong with you. You replay conversations in your head, you question your memory, your tone, your intentions, and you ask yourself why simple interactions leave you mentally exhausted and emotionally foggy. But my friend, you are not broken. What you are experiencing is not weakness, it is the natural response of a healthy nervous system placed inside an unhealthy psychological environment, and modern psychology is very clear about this. The human brain relies on consistency, predictability, and emotional cause and effect to maintain a stable sense of self. When those patterns are repeatedly disrupted, the brain does not collapse, it adapts, and adaptation under threat looks like self-doubt, hypervigilance, and confusion, not because you are incapable, but because your mind is constantly trying to resolve contradictions that were never meant to be resolved. Think about this for a moment. Why do you walk away from conversations feeling like you lost something, but you cannot name what it was? Why do compliments feel temporary, but criticism feels permanent? Why do you keep explaining yourself to someone who never truly listens? Neuroscience explains this through conditioning, intermittent reinforcement, and identity destabilization. When approval and rejection are delivered unpredictably, the brain releases dopamine in spikes, not for pleasure, but for anticipation. This keeps you emotionally alert, scanning, trying to regain equilibrium, and over time your internal compass shifts. You stop trusting your instincts because the environment keeps telling you that your perceptions are inaccurate, exaggerated, or wrong. This is not accidental. Narcissistic patterns rely on control of narrative, not always through lies, but through selective validation, emotional withdrawal, and subtle reversals that make you question your own reality. You start asking, did I misunderstand? Am I too sensitive? Maybe I overreacted. And every time you ask those questions, a small piece of your self-trust erodes, and the narcissistic dynamic strengthens, because power in these relationships does not come from dominance alone. It comes from confusion. A confused mind seeks external reference points, and the narcissist positions themselves as that reference, sometimes through charm, sometimes through authority, sometimes through victimhood, and sometimes through silence. And silence is powerful, because the human brain hates unresolved emotional loops. It will replay them endlessly, searching for closure. This is why you think about what you should have said hours later. This is why your body feels tense even when nothing is happening. This is why rest doesn't feel restorative anymore. Your nervous system is stuck in a low-grade threat response, not fear like panic, but fear like uncertainty. And uncertainty is one of the most exhausting psychological states the brain can experience. Now ask yourself this question honestly. Why do you feel clearer when you are away from them? Why does your mind feel lighter in their absence? Why do your thoughts slow down when you are not being watched, evaluated, or subtly corrected? This is not coincidence, it is evidence. Evidence that your confusion is situational, not internal. And this matters deeply because when people mislabel situational confusion as personal weakness, they try to fix themselves instead of recognizing the environment that is harming them. They read more, they explain more, they give more empathy, they become more patient, thinking clarity will return if they just try harder. But effort does not restore clarity in a system designed to destabilize it. Clarity returns when the brain is allowed to experience consistency again, when words match actions, when emotions are not punished, when boundaries are respected without retaliation. You see, narcissistic behavior in 2025 often hides behind modern language. Therapy terms are misused, accountability is rebranded as attack, boundaries are framed as betrayal, and emotional responsibility is shifted subtly onto you. So you feel guilty for reacting instead of questioning what you're reacting to, and over time this trains your inner voice to go quiet. You stop speaking up not because you have nothing to say, but because your mind has learned that expression leads to conflict, dismissal, or withdrawal, and silence feels safer. But safety through silence is not peace, it is suppression, and suppression always has a cost. It shows up as anxiety, brain fog, loss of motivation, emotional numbness, and a strange sense that you are living slightly disconnected from yourself. And listen to me now, this is critical. Confusion is not a character flaw. It is a signal that your mind is being forced to operate without reliable feedback, and the brain cannot build identity in an unstable mirror. If every reflection you receive is distorted, you will eventually stop recognizing yourself. And that is why people say they lost themselves in these dynamics, not because they were empty, but because their sense of self was slowly overwritten by survival patterns that prioritize keeping the peace over telling the truth, maintaining connection over maintaining integrity, and avoiding conflict over honoring intuition. And here is the realization that changes everything. The moment you understand that your confusion is not evidence against you, but evidence for you, everything shifts. Because instead of asking what is wrong with me, you begin asking what is happening to me. And that question restores power. Awareness brings the nervous system out of threat mode. Naming the pattern reduces its grip, and slowly, very slowly at first, your inner voice begins to return. You start noticing how often you minimize your needs, how oft you anticipate reactions, how often you doubt joy. And this awareness is not blame. It is the beginning of clarity. Relief follows realization, because you finally understand that your mind has been working overtime to protect you, even when it felt like it was failing. And hope emerges when you realize that clarity is not something you have to earn. It is something that returns naturally when the psychological fog lifts, and empowerment comes when you decide that confusion is no longer a place you will call home, that you will trust the quiet knowing in your body again, that you will honor discomfort as information, not something to be suppressed, my friend. This is about your mind. Your mind is not weak. It has been adapting, and now it is ready to remember who it was before it learned to doubt itself. Listen to me now, because this truth is uncomfortable but necessary. A narcissist does not overpower you with strength. They overpower you with access to your empathy. And this is where intelligent, emotionally aware people get trapped without realizing it. You care deeply. You listen carefully, you try to understand intentions behind behavior, and you believe that if you show enough patience, clarity, and compassion, things will eventually balance out. But my friend, empathy without boundaries is not kindness, it is exposure. And modern psychology explains this clearly. Empathic individuals have highly responsive mirror neurons, which means they naturally feel what others feel. They anticipate emotional shifts, they soften their tone, they adjust their behavior to maintain connection. And in healthy relationships, this creates trust and safety. But in narcissistic dynamics, this becomes a lever, because the narcissistic pattern is not built on mutual regulation. It is built on extraction. They extract reassurance, attention, validation, and emotional labor without offering consistent reciprocity, and slowly your empathy turns against you, not because empathy is bad, but because it is being exploited. You start explaining their behavior to yourself. You say they had a hard childhood, they are stressed, they did not mean it that way, and every time you rationalize harm, your nervous system learns to tolerate more than it should. This is how erosion happens, not through one big violation, but through hundreds of small allowances. And neuroscience calls this emotional habituation. When the brain is repeatedly exposed to discomfort without resolution, it normalizes it, so what once felt unacceptable begins to feel familiar. And familiarity is often mistaken for safety. Ask yourself this: why do you feel guilty for wanting basic respect? Why do you feel selfish for needing clarity? Why does setting a boundary feel like an act of aggression? This is conditioning. Your empathy has been trained to prioritize their emotional state over your own internal signals, and that creates emptiness, not because you lack purpose, but because you are constantly poor. Energy outward. Without replenishment, the emptiness you feel is not a mystery. It is depletion, and depletion always masquerades as self-doubt. You begin to feel less alive, less expressive, less certain, because your emotional resources are being drained in an environment that rewards your giving but punishes your needs. And listen carefully now. Empathy is meant to connect two stable identities, not stabilize one fragile ego at the expense of another person's sense of self. What looks like confidence in them is often an identity that cannot self-regulate, that requires constant external input to feel real, and when that input pauses, irritation, withdrawal, or subtle cruelty appears, not because you did something wrong, but because the supply was interrupted. And here comes the realization that brings relief. You are not cold for pulling back. You are not heartless for protecting your energy, and you are not broken for feeling empty after giving too much. Your mind and body are signaling imbalance, and empowerment begins the moment you stop using empathy to excuse harm and start using awareness to guide choice. You can care without sacrificing yourself, you can understand without absorbing, and you can be compassionate without being consumed. Because real healing is not about becoming less empathetic, it is about becoming selective, grounded, and self-respecting. And when empathy is finally paired with boundaries, it stops being a weapon against you and becomes what it was always meant to be: a strength that does not cost you your identity. Listen to me closely, because this is where illusion hides in plain sight. What you see as confidence in a narcissist is often not strength at all. It is structure, a carefully assembled identity designed to prevent collapse, and modern psychology explains this without drama. When a person's early emotional needs are not met consistently, the brain learns to build a self that is defended rather than integrated. So instead of a flexible sense of identity that can tolerate feedback, vulnerability, and uncertainty, a rigid self-image forms, one that must be protected at all costs, and this protection is mistaken for certainty. But inside there is hunger, not ambition, hunger for validation, control, and reflection. Because without constant external confirmation, the identity feels thin, unstable, and exposed. Ask yourself this: why does disagreement feel like an attack to them? Why does accountability trigger anger or withdrawal? Why do they rewrite events instead of reflecting on them? This is not confidence. This is threat response. The brain perceives any challenge as a danger to self-coherence, so it reacts defensively, not thoughtfully. And here is where it affects you, because when someone cannot tolerate their own emotional emptiness, they unconsciously recruit others to hold it for them. You become the mirror, the stabilizer, the regulator, and over time you feel smaller while they appear larger. UT appearance is not reality. Their certainty is borrowed, not generated, and your doubt is learned, not natural. Listen to me now. This is not about diagnosing them. This is about freeing yourself from comparison. You are not weak because you question yourself. Self-questioning is a sign of psychological flexibility, while rigidity is often a sign of fear. And the realization that changes everything is this: confidence that cannot sit with humility is not confidence at all. It is defense, and once you see that, you stop chasing their approval because you understand that what they are offering is not security, it is a performance, and you were never meant to disappear inside someone else's fragile sense of self. Listen to me now, because your exhaustion has been misunderstood for too long. You have been told you are too sensitive, too emotional, too affected. But what you are actually experiencing is neurological overload, not personal fragility. When the brain is placed in an environment where emotional signals are inconsistent, unpredictable, or subtly threatening, it never fully relaxes. It stays alert, scanning tone, facial expressions, pauses, and shifts in mood, and this constant monitoring drains cognitive and emotional energy. Neuroscience calls this sustained hypervigilance, and it is one of the most exhausting states the nervous system can maintain, because rest requires safety, and safety requires predictability. Ask yourself this honestly: why are you tired even when nothing dramatic is happening? Why does your body feel tense in moments that should be calm? Why does peace feel unfamiliar? This is not weakness. This is your system responding to prolonged uncertainty. Your exhaustion is the cost of adaptation. You learn to anticipate reactions, to adjust yourself before conflict arises, to keep things smooth, and while this skill once protected you, it now keeps you trapped, because the brain cannot distinguish between real danger and emotional unpredictability. It treats both as threats, and over time this erodes motivation, joy, and clarity. Listen carefully. Now, emotional exhaustion is not cured by trying harder, being kinder or understanding more. It is resolved when the nervous system is allowed to recalibrate, when it no longer has to guess what version of reality it will face next. And here comes the realization that brings relief. Your fatigue is information. It is telling you that your environment demands more regulation than your body was designed to give. And empowerment begins when you stop blaming your sensitivity and start honoring your limits. Because sensitivity is not the problem, exposure is, and healing begins when your mind learns that it no longer has to stay on guard to survive. Listen to me carefully, because this is where many people stay trapped without realizing it. The most damaging aspect of narcissistic behavior is not arrogance or self-focus. It is the absence of genuine accountability, and this NCE quietly destabilizes everyone around them. In a healthy mind, accountability is how identity stays flexible. It allows mistakes to become learning, repair to become connection, and responsibility to strengthen trust. But when accountability is missing, reality itself becomes unstable, conversations go in circles, apologies feel hollow or conditional, and responsibility is always redirected, minimized or reframed. And ask yourself this: why do you leave discussions feeling unheard, even when words were exchanged? Why does closure never arrive? This is because the brain relies on acknowledgement to complete emotional loops, and without it, tension remains unresolved, your nervous system stays activated, and clarity never settles. Listen now, this is not about winning arguments. It is about psychological safety. When someone cannot reflect on their impact, they cannot co-regulate emotions with others. So you end up carrying the weight alone, and over time this creates self-doubt, because you keep trying to reason inside a system that does not accept responsibility. And here is the realization that brings relief. Accountability is not something you can demand into existence. It is a capacity. And when that capacity is missing, the healthiest response is not persistence, it is distance, because healing does not come from explaining yourself to someone who cannot hear you. It comes from choosing environments where responsibility exists and repair is possible. Listen to me now, because this is the moment where power quietly returns to you. Healing does not begin with understanding them more. It begins when your attention turns inward and you ask a different question. Not why are they like this, but why did I silence myself? This question is not blame, it is awareness, and awareness is where change starts. Psychology shows that people stay in harmful dynamics not because they enjoy pain, but because familiar patterns feel safer than uncertain freedom. Your nervous system learned that staying, adapting, and enduring preserved connection, even when it cost you yourself. And that learning made sense once, but it does not have to define you now. Ask yourself this gently: what did I believe would happen if I spoke up? What fear kept me quiet? What part of me was trying to survive? And listen carefully. Choosing yourself does not mean becoming cold or closed. It means becoming honest. Honesty with your limits. Honesty with your needs, honesty with your inner signals. And here comes the realization that brings relief. Silence was a strategy, not a failure, and strategies can be updated. Empowerment is the moment you allow your voice to return, not all at once, but steadily, through small choices that honor your clarity, because healing is not dramatic. It is deliberate, and the mind is not fixed. It is plastic. It learns safety again when you choose environments that respect your reality, and from that place something powerful happens. You no longer seek peace, a mission to exist. You begin to live. Listen to me now, and let this be the moment where everything you have heard comes together. Because awareness without decision is only information, and you are standing at a quiet but powerful crossroads. You have seen that confusion was never your weakness, empathy was never your flaw, exhaustion was never sensitivity, and silence was never failure. They were adaptations, intelligent responses to an environment that required you to survive instead of thrive. And this realization matters, because once you understand that your mind has been protecting you all along, shame begins to loosen its grip. And when shame loosens, choice returns, my friend. This is about responsibility, not for fixing another person, but for honoring your own psychological reality. You cannot heal in the same conditions that trained you to doubt yourself, And you do not need permission to step into clarity. Pause for a moment now. Feel your body. Notice your breath. Notice that you are here, present, aware, and capable of choosing differently. Ask yourself gently, what would change if I trusted my inner signals again? What would my life look like if peace became the standard instead of the reward? Listen carefully. The mind is not static. It is adaptable. It can relearn safety, rebuild identity, and restore self-worth. When given consistent, respectful environments, healing is possible, not because time passes, but because awareness is acted upon. So make the inner decision today, to listen when something feels wrong, to speak when silence costs too much, to step toward clarity, even when fear whispers otherwise. I wish you strength for the choices ahead, patience with yourself as you heal, and courage to honor who you are becoming. Good luck on this journey back to yourself, and thank you for listening.